We are making our own story as we go, as we go, as we go. Hoping, we are hoping that we'll go so happy ever after, happy ever after.
Hi, welcome to Your Dream Day podcast. I am your host, Kathy Piech-Lukas with Your Dream Day Wedding Planning. And today I have a very, very special guest. I have Jon Lattier here from Bluewat Kings Band, which is my favorite band to work with at wedding receptions. Jon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Kathy. How you doing?
Good, good. One thing that I can't stress enough with bands versus DJs, which is what we're going to talk about today, the big differences is bands are human. You're only human, right?
Absolutely. I mean, a DJ is a human too, but they're a human operating a machine, and we are a human expressing human emotions at the deepest level. So, it's a slightly different, take. But yes, we are very much human and have to work within those confines.
One thing that I think bands do is versus a DJ is you create a very, very different ambiance and environment for the reception. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what you see from the band's perspective when you're on the stage and you see the guests and the energy? How is it different?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I guess the number one thing is if somebody calls us to hire us for their event, a wedding or whatever it is, it's very intentional because bands are very much more expensive than a DJ. And so most people who want to hire a band specifically want the experience of live music and have made room in their budget for it. That is usually reflected by people who know that they have a friend group or a family group or both who love music, love the interactive nature of live music, and just love to have a good time and dance and sing along and celebrate. And we really see that at most of our events. 95% of our events, we're playing to packed dance floors all night with smiling people dancing around. They interact with us. We feel their energy and we're able to channel that back to them and we can have some fun with it. I mean, anyone who's known me for any amount of time knows that I'm all about the dad jokes, and well, in between songs, I'll drop a pun here and there, and sometimes it lands, sometimes it gets a groan, but the groan for me is a good thing, and that's all part of the fun of it. You get that, you get the music, you get people singing along. Sometimes those singers like hold the mic out towards the crowd if people really feel it. It's really a palpable energy. You can get full dance floors sometimes with the DJ too, but that's mostly because it's just a song that people likes. With us, it's more than just the song. It's the pure, kind of visceral energy of feeling music performed by live musicians. And we also get a lot of interaction, especially when we bring out the horn section. People seem to love that. I've seen people get down on their knees and wave their hands at the horn players and just it's really kind of takes the party to the next level.
It really does. And, going back to the whole human factor, you tap into the emotion differently than pre-recorded music would, because everybody knows what to expect with pre-recorded music. With live music, that's just it. It's live and it's a different energy, and you may have a different inflection on a note than you did the last time you performed it, or you engage the crowd with things that are going to get them on their feet and excited. The big reason for the price gap between a DJ and a band is the quantity of people that are there. When you hire a DJ, you got one person. When you hire a band, you could have anywhere from 4 to 12 pieces. Pieces meaning instruments.
Sure. That's kind of the beauty that we do. And I know some bands, it's kind of like you either get the band or, and it's a flat rate and it's the same thing every time. That's a good model for us. We try to be a little flexible with budgets because we know some people love live music. a lot of times we've played at musicians' weddings before, and they want a band, obviously, because it's what they do, either as a full-time or a part-time job, or sometimes even just a hobbyist. But there's a stereotype of musicians not always having that much money, and so sometimes they got to go with a smaller group. So we bring out a little 5, 6 piece band. It's just the rhythm section. And when I say rhythm section, I mean the drums, the bass, guitar, and keyboard. Because if we're playing popular dance music without those 4 instruments backing the
That can't
music, you
happen.
can't have that. And then I always encourage people, you want 2 singers to get harmony. Somebody's got to hit the high notes, somebody's got to hit the low notes. And we can go from there. Then, like I mentioned before, we add on the horn players after that. The iconic 3 piece horn section of trumpet, trombone, and saxophone is great. Sometimes, if we keep going from there, you add a second saxophone, usually a bari sax, which gives you that big beefy low notes of the horn section, which I absolutely love that sound. You hear it in a lot of Motown, Stevie Wonder. It's this big honking thing. And then if you want to blow out, we'll bring 4 or 5 singers and we'll add an auxiliary percussionist. My wife plays percussion with us sometimes, and it's really fun. Everybody says it's really cool. You can drive together to the gig, and I'm like, you crazy? I got I got all my gear and all her gear, and we got to drop the kids off. You think we can both fit in one car? It's
So here's the big question:
yeah.
when are the kids going to be old enough to get on stage?
Oh, I tell you what, my son's 4 right now, and he's already learning how to patch an XLR cable into a stage snake. So, we're working on it. We'll teach him how to wrap cables over under in a couple years, and then I'll start. Maybe, I don't know. Once he's 10, he's probably gonna come out with me and help me set up and things like that. We'll see. I don't know. He may not really be that into music, but I think it's unlikely, given his upbringing.
I was going to say, given his pedigree, it's almost in there that he's probably going to at some point.
He tells us right now not to sing along with songs when they're on, when we're playing music. It's basically the little kid version of who sings this song? Let's keep it that way. So
Well, and the other thing I think that is a little bit different with a band versus a DJ is the timeline for the reception. Do you want to talk a little bit about how different it is?
yeah, so the main thing with the band is, back to the being human thing. We do need a couple breaks. Now, I know there is one band in town that offers a top to bottom straight through 3-hour performance, but that is a very expensive band. And
It sounds
honestly,
like it sounds painful. My lips are like quivering just thinking of having to play for
well,
3 hours straight.
well, here's the thing. The only people in the band who are actually playing for the entire time are the drummer, the bassist, and the keyboardist. Everyone else has moments where they're able to, step off stage, use the restroom, grab a drink, something like that. But, for the rhythm section, now, fortunately, us rhythm section players don't need our face to play the instrument. So the fatigue takes longer to set in. And the hardest part is 3 hours on your feet, moving and getting into it, not just standing. A lot of people can stand for 3 hours, no problem, but 3 hours of really focusing and energy. But that's a premium service that they offer. Most other bands, us and a lot of the other groups included, usually play between 50 to 70 minute increments. We call them sets. And then for us, we take 15-minute set breaks. So what I usually try and tell people to do is a lot for at least 3.5 hours for your dance portion of the night if you want to get the full effect of the music. Because that gives us a chance to play 3 60-minute sets, which is a good amount of music, then gives us 2 short 15-minute breaks. And when we take a break, we put music on. It's not just awkward silence. We keep it going. We'll play things. Sometimes people have certain requests, and not not to sound pejorative, but they kind of want some of the ratchet stuff, radio rap and 808s that is not really conducive to live instruments.
I was
And
gonna
so if
say,
they want,
don't
yeah,
rap? Come on.
yeah. Well, no, we have people in the band who can rap, but it's not so much the rapping that's the issue, it's the beat, because a lot of those beats are produced in a studio by a producer with
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with kind of
That makes sense.
yeah, it's basically like a studio DJ track instead of, real live drums and real live guitars, things like that. That is sometimes what we'll put on during our break.
Yep.
And here's another thing about the timeline with a live band is a lot of times we will play folks cocktail hours because many of us being formally trained in music, we can play a nice jazzy instrumental. We can kind of be flexible with the kind of music we play and put our own spin on songs. If someone wants a set of instrumental Motown, we can do that with it's usually a smaller group of people, sometimes in a different location in the venue, and we'll do that. And then we come in with the for the dinner. And some folks want us to play live through dinner. And I always have to give a caveat on that because not that we are an intentionally loud band, we are actually very conscious of our volume, especially given some of these cavernous, high ceilinged rooms that we play in that have terrible acoustics. Not trying to call out any specific venues, but a lot of them happen to be downtown.
No,
they're just old. They're
they're
just old
old.
buildings. They're
Yeah,
old
they're
buildings.
old.
They weren't designed. There's some venues that are more modern with lower ceilings and a lot of carpet and a lot of wood. They sound really good. But in these older high ceiling venues that were around before amplified music was, we have to be conscious of how loud we are because too loud in a room like that is just deafening and washy and unpleasant for everyone. But the volume is especially a thing during dinner, which is why we will usually take a break during dinner and put on soft recorded music because it gives us a chance to eat our vendor meals and
That's
it's not
actually
too
another
loud.
thing I was going to bring up is that
Okay, great.
the one thing that is different with bands is most bands have in their contract that they are to be fed during dinner. And so that's something you need to keep in mind with your budget when you book the band, because you're booking them for, depending on how many, again, it goes back to how many pieces, how many instruments do you have? I mean, most bands are going to range anywhere from like the lowest 4,000 up to like 12,000. And you have to also budget for a meal for each one of them. And you do eat it during dinner the same time everybody else does.
Yeah. In our contract, we specify we need a hot meal, and that's kind of something new. Now, we don't need, I know some caterers, each meal, if you're having a seated plated meal, each meal can be rather expensive. And we don't necessarily require exactly what they're eating, but it can't be, we call them in the industry, we call them bandwiches, which is like a cold cut turkey sandwich with American cheese on Wonder Bread and then a bag of chips. Like that doesn't cut it, especially for, like the drummer and the sound engineer. They're there. I mean, so sometimes for the smaller band, and you've seen me do it, Kathy, I will run sound for the band and I'm on stage playing bass with the band. That's like an 11-hour day for me. I usually show up to the venue around 2 p.m., spend 3 hours setting up. Then I'll play a cocktail hour with the group. And then I sit down and eat dinner. And then we play, and I'm, sweating my face off for 3 or 4 hours playing music with the band. And then at the end of the night, after doing all that, I got to tear down my sound system and load it in my car. I need a cold cut sandwich just isn't going to cut it in between
Oh,
that time.
I am right there with you because we actually have it in our wedding planning contract because our typical wedding day is about 15 hours.
Sure.
The longest one I ever had was 21.
Woo!
Yeah. After that, I put a couple of changes in my contract because
Yeah.
I was exhausted for the next 2 days. But we
Can't
have
imagine.
we have it in our contract that we are required to be fed lunch and dinner, and that we have a 30-minute break to consume them. Because what was
Yes.
happening was it was taking me 3 hours to eat my dinner because I always have to pop up and down, up and down, up and down, because, we have to talk to the band, or we have to talk to the MC, or we have to go make sure that dinner's being served properly, or we have to make sure that the champagne is being poured because the toast is going to start shortly after that. And so, there are times where, I've been eating and I'll come back and my meal's been taken away and I barely even touched it. And you're like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
leave my food alone. And so we ended up putting it in there that we have 30-minute break that is dedicated to consuming our food. Like we had to get that specific, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's ours. That's we do. I also in our contract it does require a 30-minute meal break. And there are some times where clients try and get around that and they'll be like, "Oh, well, we want you to play cocktail hour and dinner." And I'm like, "Well, everybody's got to eat." And they're like, "Okay, well, the cocktail band can eat during dinner and the dinner band can eat during cocktail." I'm like, "Well, usually the people playing are the
The
rhythm
same
section
people.
players like me, me and the piano player and the guitar player and sometimes the drummer." So it's, we play a lot more music, and then also the MC. Some people will be like, "Well, you can eat during this, but the speeches happen 10 minutes after everyone sits down." I'm like, "Well, our MC and sound engineer have to be there for that. When are they going to get their 30 minutes?" So I always have to remind people, and sometimes we do split it up, but most folks are accommodating because 30 minutes over the course of a 6 hour or so event, for them at least, is not that unreasonable because there usually is that time. It gets a little tricky. These East Coast style weddings have been becoming more popular, where they want us to play like little 20-minute sets, like before salads, then in between salads and meals, and then after dinner before the speeches. I don't know if you've done one of those yet, but apparently that's how weddings go out in New York, and it's
Yes.
it's leaching its way westward from there.
It's
So
fascinating because I had a podcast a while back with a company called Island Brothers Productions, and they're a DJ company from the West Coast that recently relocated to the Midwest. And the topic that we talked about was Midwest versus West Coast
okay,
timelines, and they were saying the same thing. It's a like out there, it's a completely different vibe than it is in the Midwest. Whereas like
hmm
Midwest, you get a lot of, it's a very rigid timeline where you have,
yeah,
okay, first we're going to eat dinner, then we're going to go to toast, then we're going to cut the cake, then we're going to do a first dance, then we're going to do
hmm
this. And out there, it's more about the club vibe and
okay,
just packing the dance floor. And then like you were saying with East Coast, it's a little more broken up even more than
sure.
your typical Midwest would be.
I don't mind a loose event. I'm sure saying that to you as a planner is
Oh,
is probably
I
it's
go
probably
with the
painful to
flow.
hear. Yeah, that's
I
that's what I tell people, and especially some of the most fun events we've done is where it's a couple will already be married, and they're like, "Yeah, so we're not having a formal sit down dinner, and we just want people to dance and have a good time." Because usually for those events, first of all, they're not picky about when we take our dinner break, and then we can be flexible about all of our breaks in general. I mean, we did one of those at Hyde Park Country Club last year, and it was kind of a long night, and we stretched our breaks a little bit, but we also got to musically stretch out because we had a big band, so we got to let our horns, rip some face melting solos, and in between we'd take breaks. And I remember they had the best meatballs. I don't know why these meatballs. I still remember, this is a year and a half ago. This was August 2022. I still remember these meatballs were so good.
That's funny.
That's
It's
that's me
amazing.
though.
You remember the best vendor meal you ever had and the worst vendor meal you've ever had. Isn't that true?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man, so there's a venue, I'm not going to name names. It's a venue that I've heard is actually closing.
Is it the
But
chicken salad?
oh, the chicken salad. Oh,
Oh,
you know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh man, they were infamous for
it
that.
was horrible.
It's funny because we'd walk in and the bartenders would see us and like, "Oh, you're in the band, we'll pour you a double." But then we get this chicken salad. I'm like, actually you can like I would rather to have a nicer meal and not have the bartenders be so concerned about filling up our drinks all the
Well,
time.
one time, like well, because I eat low carb, and so I I had to take the
Pull
chicken
the chicken
salad
off the
off the
bread.
croissant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh
And
yeah.
then one of my assistants was vegan, so she couldn't eat any of it.
Oh no.
It was
Yeah,
like,
we
oh my gosh, it was,
we
oh
run into
yes.
that. We have a handful of vegans and vegetarians in the band. We have one actually a drummer, one of my favorite drummers in the city. He is a vegan, but he's also allergic to nuts. And
Oh
so
yeah.
that's always fun when I gotta tell people, and it's more and more in the modern era, it's not really that difficult to accommodate. But he got one, it was just this past summer actually. They brought him a meal that was accommodating for him, and it was literally like chopped up tomatoes on a bed of brown rice.
Ooh,
And he always packs a sandwich because he knows half the time they're not going to have something he can eat. It's
that's
it's
that's
interesting, like
scary
seeing
that
some
we
of the
both
meals there.
had the same vendor meal that we both said is the worst one we ever had. That is
It's everybody in the
hysterical.
everybody on our roster who played that venue always talks about it. It's like an inside joke in the band at this point.
But I think the best meal I ever had was a surf and turf where we had
Ooh,
lobster and we had filet, and the potatoes that they had were just, oh, they were
yeah,
amazing. Like, I'll never forget that. That was probably the best meal that it might have been the best meal I've ever had, let alone just the best vendor
sure.
meal I've ever had. It was just unbelievable. It was a wedding that we had at a private estate
Okay,
up in the Cleveland area
okay,
On Lake Milton. And this
nice.
family had a beautiful, beautiful property. And so we had the ceremony in the backyard overlooking their pool and on their deck. And then
Okay,
we had a cocktail hour inside the house, and we had to clear out all the furniture out of the house and put it in a storage unit for the week so that we could have cocktail hour in there. And
wow,
then, yeah. And then we put a tent up in the driveway in the front. And that was where we had the dinner reception. We had valet for parking. So that was how we were able to, keep the tent in the front on the concrete and everything. But
sure,
yes, hands down, best vendor meal ever.
nice. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I remember having one. This was what, February 2020, so probably probably a month or so before the great shutdown.
Ugh.
And that
That
was it was at
killed our industry. That
oh
killed our
man,
industry. I don't think
it
people
was
I,
it was
I
bad.
it was really bad. I mean, the hospitality industry, hands down, was hit the hardest during the pandemic because
Hmm.
they would every week the rules were changing as to
Oh
what you
yeah,
could and couldn't do. And then you would get calls from your couples, and they would say, I want to postpone, I want to postpone. I mean, I think
yeah,
every vendor learned what the term force majeure means during the
oh
pandemic,
yeah, oh
which,
yeah,
for those of you listening, the big difference is an act of God is a volcano erupting or an earthquake occurring or a blizzard happening. How the government reacts to it is force majeure. And so the pandemic itself, the virus was an act of God, but the way that our government reacted to it was force majeure. So if you're reading your contracts and you see that clause in there, that's what it means.
that's interesting. I always thought those were interchangeable.
I
So
did
I'm
too
glad.
until the
Yeah,
pandemic. Then I learned, okay, Kathy didn't go to law school. Her husband did, but
right.
she didn't.
Okay, there you go. All right. Okay,
But
well, I learned something today. I was today years old. So,
well, and the other thing that bands also incorporate into their group of musicians is an MC. And the job of the MC is to keep everything on track for the evening.
yes, that's true. Now, I want to put this caveat up here because this has bitten us, I want to say twice now in the past 4 years since I took over management of this band. We are an MC. We conduct the ceremony, we run things. We are not the planner. And some people, I love working with planners, and most of the time, if people can afford a band, they can also afford a planner. So luckily, we get to work with people like Kathy a lot, which is great. But I want to say about 20% of the weddings we do don't have a planner. They'll have a day of coordinator who works at the venue to kind of help keep things along. But there was definitely a couple instances where our MC, because what our MC does is we check in. We check in to make sure people are ready. We don't just say, "Yeah, we're gonna start toasts now," and the father of the bride is in the bathroom or something. We always
Oh,
check in.
yep.
We always check in beforehand, and I can think of one specific event where we got yelled at for checking in, and they're like, "You have the schedule, you know what you're supposed to do, just do it." And it just, I'm like, but what if we had just done it and something wasn't right, or somebody wasn't
Yep.
ready, or somebody was still eating, I want people to know that an MC is different than a planner. Granted, the MC does, once it's time to go, we take charge. And also we check in with not just the client, but other folks who might have, stake in the situation, so especially videographers and photographers. Because if they're not there for a moment that's about to happen, that could come back to bite them if they miss an important shot of whatever's happening. So there's a lot of coordination happening. So having a planner, everyone, is a great idea. Just putting that out there.
People don't realize all the stuff that we do behind the scenes. Like we prevent catastrophes from happening. We keep things running smoothly. We make sure that nobody who should be in the room, everybody is actually in the room. Like you said, I've had it where dad is disappeared in the bathroom, or one time I had a client and they had a band, and what happened was the mother of the bride had Alzheimer's. She was getting to that stage where it was getting harder and harder to hide. I knew, obviously the father of the bride knew. When we were about ready to go into the toast was when she went into the bathroom and insisted that the father of the bride stand outside the door. He could not leave that post. And so we checked in with him and said, do you want us to wait? What would you like us to do? And he said, she could be 20 minutes to half an hour for all I know. He said, just go proceed. He's like, I'll just listen, but proceed. But it's important that we check in because a situation just like that could happen. And we want to make sure that everybody who needs to be in the room is in the room, because the photographer needs to be in the room, videographer needs to be in the room, and then any important parents, people in the wedding party, matron of honor, best man, they all need to be there.
That's why I say, when it's time to do something, we direct people, and we'll give them technical instructions. Hold the mic like this, stand over here, look at the couple when you're talking, things like that. But yeah, we need to make sure that all the VIPs, both on the vendor side and the guest list, are there before something can happen. But yeah, so the MC, so assuming that everybody's in the right place and ready to go when they need to be, our MC, we'll do things like ask guests to take their seats, announce that champagne is being toured, announce when dinner starts. We'll make housekeeping announcements if we need to. Somebody's headlights are on, whatever. Our main role is to introduce the couple and the wedding party. Although, I'm finding a lot of people are skipping the wedding party now.
Yes, they're going right into the first dance.
Yes, they'll skip the wedding party. They just introduce the couple. They go into the first dance immediately. Our MC will obviously announce that first dance, which sometimes we play that live, sometimes we play the recorded version, depending on the client's requests. I always tell people, if you're doing choreography, the recording is the way to go, because while we can do a great version of whatever song it is, it's going to sound different, and I don't want to mess up your choreography. Now, if you don't have choreography, I say go live band, because, well, what else did you hire us for, right? So,
right.
And then after your dance, then there's usually some formalities, maybe a welcome speech, maybe a blessing, something else before dinner. We'll introduce that. We'll announce when dinner happens. Then we get through that. Then we go get our vendor meal that we spoke about before. We'll come back. Then there's usually toasts after dinner. Not always, but sometimes, it's pretty common. We'll announce those. We'll announce any other special dances, family, parent dances, things like that. And then if there's other things, a lot of times at our event, usually a lot of the gimmicky stuff, I'm not trying to be pejorative about that, but things like the shoe game or the anniversary dance, or there's a couple other games I've seen before. We don't do that as much. And I find that usually when people hire bands, they kind of don't want that kind of stuff, but our MC will do that. We've done that before. We've actually had our MC, we've hosted a couple trivia games before. It happens, but that does seem, like I said, a little gimmicky. Some people like that, but a lot of times that kind of gets relegated to the DJ events.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because again, back to my initial statement, hiring a band is very intentional. And usually if they've got a live band there, it's because they want music to be the main feature of the reception.
Absolutely.
But our MC, we are able to MC any and all of those things. And then obviously we'll announce when the dancing starts, when last call for the bar is. If there's a shuttle, we make those announcements. And then we send everyone off at the end of the night.
Well, and I think one other thing that is very important when you decide if you want a band is don't wait to book.
Yes.
Because you book up fast.
We do. I've got inquiries. I've got several secured bookings for 2025 already. I think my furthest booking right now is October 2025. Especially if you're trying to secure a band on a peak date, which peak dates in the wedding industry, for those of you who don't know, if it's your first wedding, May, June, September, and October Saturdays. Those are the busiest days of the year for all wedding professionals. So if you want the vendors that you want, if you want a good planner like Kathy and a good band like us, you got to get to us at least a year out.
Yep.
So,
we're already, there's another date this in 2024 that's going to be a hot date. May 4th.
May 4th.
Because of all
May
the
the 4th.
Yep.
May
Because
the
of all
4th be with you. Yeah.
Yep. It's a Saturday.
It sure is, isn't it?
That was one of the first dates that booked out for me. And then they told me it was a Star Wars wedding, and I'm like, oh, that's right.
Sure.
And then I'm like, oh, it's a Saturday. This date is going to sell out very quickly this year for everybody.
Yep, sure. I love it. And that's also the weekend of the Derby. And usually we're very busy that weekend.
Yep. I forgot. Oh, but it is going to be. I didn't realize the Derby was that weekend too. That is going to be
that's
normally
normally an extremely busy weekend for us. And I know we have we're doing a corporate thing down in Lexington for a Derby party that Friday. So
wow. Well, it goes to show you, if you're going to have a band, it needs to be in the beginnings of your planning. So once you book your venue, if you're getting a church, next is your band. If you know you want a band. And most people who want a band, they know they want a band going into the planning. That's what I tend to see.
Yes. And I will say, sometimes for us, because our contract is a little flexible, even if you don't have a venue yet, if you're still kind of tossing up some ideas, we're happy to give suggestions. Because as I mentioned before, some venues a band sounds much better in than others. We get a lot of bookings in venues that just don't sound all that great. They look amazing, but they don't sound great. So that's a decision. And obviously I'm not here to talk poorly about any venues, because many of those venues have great staff.
But it's an important thing to remember, because if, and it goes back to, if you know you want a band, you tend to lean toward it in the beginning that, we want live music. We want a band. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important, because if you want the full benefit of those musicians and the art that they're performing that night, if you have a place that echoes, it's going to be very difficult to really appreciate what's being played.
Absolutely. I always say that to people. So if somebody reaches out to us, and 90% of events that book us have already got the venue selected, but for those that don't, I always like to make recommendations. And obviously my opinion, it works. Actually, one time somebody had a couple different venues they were looking at, and I gave them they had 3 possible venues, and I gave them my top to bottom recommendation on that. And they ended up picking my top recommendation, and I think they're going to have a better event because of it. So
that's wonderful advice. Jon, how can people find Blue Water Kings Band?
We are really easy to find, because we put a decent amount of money into Google optimization. So if you type Wedding Band Cincinnati, we will be one of the top first 5 links that you'll see. Obviously, that wouldn't be my recommendation. You can also find us at www.bluewaterkingsband.com. We are on Instagram at Blue Water Kings. We also have a Facebook page. We're probably on TikTok too. I'm an old guy, so I don't really do TikTok. The website.
And you do travel. You do travel.
We do travel. So the band that I manage out of Cincinnati, we service Dayton and even north of Dayton up to Troy and Piech-Lukas area. We've gone as far north as Toledo, although usually we have another band. So we have a band in every major city in the Midwest operating under the Blue Water Kings Band. They're all friends of ours. So there's one in Detroit. So normally Detroit takes care of Toledo. They were very busy one weekend, and we drove all the way up there. We go down to Louisville, Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, Dayton, Ohio, any of the rural areas in between. Then I know Miamisburg and Hamilton have some nice venues that we go up to, Lake Lindsay and whatnot. So a lot of yeah, we'll go basically anywhere within a 2-hour radius of Cincinnati. Occasionally we'll go further. In August, we did an event down in Owensboro, Kentucky. That's about a 3.5 hour drive. The drive home from that wasn't super fun, but the event was. So
Wonderful. So if you're interested in looking more into Jon and Blue Water Kings Band, be sure to check out their website and all their social media. Jon, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for tuning into your Dream Day podcast. Please subscribe. You can visit us on dreamdaypodcast.com, or you can go on yourdreamday.com, where you can listen to our podcast on all of your favorite outlets, including Apple, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Pandora, Alexa, and everywhere else where you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. This is Kathy Piech-Lukas signing off, and happy planning.